you were around during the Mike Leach era, and
Yep.
that's a guy who I never got to interview. I never got to talk to. I've only ever got to hear secondhand stories from, and he was a guy that every story you hear from him is more interesting than the last. Every quote that he gives is more interesting than the last. The only coach that I could think of that comes close is maybe Ed Sheff for Lewis Clark State baseball. Um, what was your experience with Mike Leach, and do you have any good Mike Leach stories or quotes that you could shed to light here on this podcast?
Yeah, there's one story that kind of sticks out that's not maybe as public as the rest, because obviously a lot of our interactions were, post game press conferences, post practice interviews, and a lot of that stuff people ended up finding on YouTube, and obviously a lot of his clips went viral for the quirky non-football quotes and comments he would have after games and practices. So, but the one thing that stuck out, I think it might have been my first year covering the beat. I think I had reposted something on Twitter that was kind of critical of Leach's handling of media. I think it was an Oregonian columnist who had, written a column, and I think I reposted it and, basically said, yeah, I agree with everything that Ken's saying here. And all of it was pretty critical of Leach, and I figured, Leach isn't going to see it. He's not on Twitter. But later that day after practice, he I think we finished up our post-game or post-practice interviews, and he pulled me aside and confronted me, and he said, I saw what you posted, and I don't care if you agree with me, and kind of really let me have it for about 5 minutes, and a lot of F-bombs in there mixed in. So that was intimidating, to say the least. And I think the one thing that stood out to me was him saying, do you want to be the type of journalist that goes and writes a great book, or are you going to sit on your couch and smoke weed all day? And I don't know if that was the exact quote, but it was pretty close to what he said. And I said, well, I don't really have a desire to write a book right now, but I'm also not going to sit on my couch and smoke weed. So maybe there's like some middle ground there. But we talked it over, and I think we left the conversation in a better place than we started. And I think at the end of the conversation, he gave me his phone number and said, if there's anything you ever need, feel free to reach out. And I think after that we had a pretty good relationship, and it was it was a working relationship, and he was someone that I could text if I needed a quick phone call or a comment on something. And I remember when his defensive coordinator left midseason 2019. I think it was during a bye week, and I had gone to the Seattle area for a wedding during the bye week, and this comes out on a Friday, the day before the wedding, and I'm driving out there and have to stop and write a story about the DC leaving. And the next morning I was on the way to the wedding, and Mike had agreed to talk with me for 5-10 minutes about why the DC ended up leaving. And I took the phone call from this random church in Washington, and wrote a quick story on my phone, sent it to the copy desk from my notes app, and we ran the story that day. So I think we ended up having a great relationship. When he left Washington State, I was still the beat writer, and texted him, I think the same night that he was hired at Mississippi State, and just said, hey Mike, thanks for everything, congrats on the new gig, wish you the best, and I'll see you down the road. And he responded right away and said, thanks, you did a great job covering our team, and appreciate your work, and best of luck. So I had a good experience covering him. I know there's probably some writers who didn't have the best experience, and he could be prickly at times, but that was something that you had to deal with. And I always tell people that you want to cover interesting people doing this job, and he was as interesting as you could get as far as a coach or an athlete goes. And so there's always stuff to write about, and I never lacked any content or clicks, that's for sure.